My name is Mark Reynolds, and if you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you I was living the American dream. I was 36, working as a senior project manager at a tech firm in Dallas, driving a silver Ford F-150 that smelled like coffee and motor oil, and married to Jessica, a woman I believed was my partner for life. We had a little brick house in Plano with a trimmed lawn, a golden retriever named Duke, and a photo on the mantle of ease smiling in front of the Grand Canyon. To the outside world, we were that picture-perfect couple, the kind you see on Christmas cards or wedding invitations. Inside, I thought so too, until one Friday evening shattered everything I thought I knew about marriage, loyalty, and trust. That Friday was the company's quarterly mixer, a fancy dinner at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse downtown. It was one of those nights where the men wore jackets that smelled faintly of cigar smoke. The women wore jewelry that clinked against champagne glasses, and the waiters kept circling with trays of seared scallops. My boss, Daniel Chandler, was hosting. Chandler was in his mid-40s, tall with silver hair, the kind of man who looked like he was born in a boardroom. He was the company's golden boy, sharp, wealthy, and always reminding us how he built himself from nothing. I respected him, looked up to him even, though I knew he loved the spotlight more than any of us. Jessica had insisted on coming along. She said she wanted to see the world I worked in. She wore a navy blue dress that clung to her in ways that made every man at the table take notice, though I told myself that was just my husband's paranoia kicking in. I wanted to believe she was proud of me, that she wanted to be part of the evening. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Chandler gave a speech about growth, raising his glass like some Texas king blessing his kingdom. People laughed, clapped, whispered about his Rolex and the car he parked out front. An all-black Tesla Model S. I sat there sipping bourbon, proud that I worked under a man like him. Then I noticed something. Jessica wasn't sitting close to me anymore. She was leaning into Chandler, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. At first, I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe she was just laughing too hard at one of his jokes. But then Chandler placed his hand on her thigh under the white tablecloth, and Jessica didn't move it away. My chest tightened, my grip on the bourbon glass so hard I thought it might shatter. My ears rang with the sound of betrayal, though no one else seemed to react. A few coworkers exchanged glances, but they turned away quick, as if pretending not to see was easier than facing the truth. I remember staring at the clock on the wall, 8:47 p.m. That was the exact moment my marriage collapsed. It wasn't in a hotel room, it wasn't in secret, it was right there in broad daylight, under chandeliers and steak knives, in front of colleagues who suddenly couldn't look me in the eye. I wanted to stand up, slam my fist on the table, scream that this was my wife and my boss, but I froze. Maybe it was humiliation, maybe it was disbelief, but I sat there in silence while the two people I trusted most stole something from me. Chandler whispered something into Jessica's ear that made her laugh. Our inside joke laugh, the one I thought was only mine. My hands shook so bad the bourbon spilled onto the linen tablecloth. I excused myself to the restroom. Inside the mirror, I didn't recognize the man staring back. My tie was loose, my eyes bloodshot. I looked like a man who had just walked into a car crash. I splashed water on my face, trying to convince myself I imagined it. But when I came back, Jessica and Chandler were gone. Their chairs sat empty, napkins tossed carelessly like evidence at a crime scene. My coworker, a guy named Paul, muttered, "Don't take it personal, Mark." That one line was enough to tell me everyone knew, and everyone had been watching. My humiliation was complete. I drove home alone that night. The Dallas sea line blurred through my windshield as I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I ever had in my life. Jessica texted me once around midnight. "Stayed with a friend, don't wait up." A friend. That word burned like acid. Duke was waiting by the door when I got home, tail wagging, but even his golden brown eyes couldn't fill the hollow ache inside me. I poured another drink, sat on the couch, and stared at the dark TV screen like it might give me answers. All I saw was the reflection of a man whose wife had chosen betrayal in front of the entire company. The next morning, Jessica acted as if nothing happened. She walked into the kitchen in her robe, poured herself coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I wanted pancakes. I stood there in silence, my knuckles white around the coffee mug, wondering how she could pretend so easily. When I asked her where she had been, she rolled her eyes and said, "You're imagining things, Mark. Don't be so insecure." Gaslighting, I later learned, was the word for it. At the time, it just felt like being punched twice, first by betrayal, then by denial. I went to work Monday and faced Chandler in his office. He smiled, patted me on the back, and told me to focus on the numbers, not the drama. His arrogance was worse than the betrayal. He didn't just take what was mine, he wanted me to thank him for it. That was the day I stopped being Mark Reynolds, the loyal husband and employee. That was the day I began quietly plotting. Because betrayal might break you in the moment, but silence gives you space to plan. And I wasn't about to let Jessica or Chandler walk away clean, not after humiliating me in front of everyone, not after turning my life into a public joke. If Chandler thought I was just going to swallow it and move on, he didn't know me at all. The Saturday after the steakhouse felt like a slow-motion car wreck I had to watch from the driver's seat. Jessica moved through the house like a woman in a toothpaste commercial, robe-tied, hair up, humming along to country radio as if the night before had been a pleasant dinner with colleagues instead of a public execution of our marriage. She made pancakes, stacked them high, drizzled syrup, and asked about my weekend plans as if we were the couple on the mantle photo again. I chewed rubbery bites and stared at her left hand. She still wore the ring I bought at Robbins Brothers off Central Expressway, the one I paid off with overtime hours and a maxed-out Discover card, because love is supposed to be a down payment, not a debt you collect interest on. Every time the diamond caught the kitchen light, it flashed like a warning signal I had ignored for too long. I did not accuse her. That would have been round two of the same fight where she'd roll her eyes and say, I was insecure, that Chandler was just friendly, that I drank too much bourbon and imagined hands under tablecloths like some jealous kid from a bad country song. I took Duke for a walk instead, circling the block past the neighbor's flagpole and the same crepe myrtles that drop pink petals like confetti on the sidewalk. The air smelled like cut grass and cheap charcoal. I watched normal couples carry groceries, argue over brand-name cereal, and I felt like I had been kicked out of a life everyone else still got to live. That afternoon I drove because motion was the only thing that kept the ache in my chest from turning into something worse. I-75 to Woodall Rogers, then I-35 like a spine that holds the whole Metroplex together. I ended up at a Whataburger near the Trinity River, the orange and white stripes glaring against the Texas sky. I ordered a patty melt and ate it in the truck with the windows down. The radio chattered about the Cowboys preseason, and the grease bled through the paper onto my jeans. It felt like a ritual I could control. Bite, swallow, breathe. I watched families in minivans and couples sharing fries and wondered what I had missed in my own house while I was busy being dependable. When I got home, Jessica had gone to Target. Her phone, though, sat charging on the kitchen counter, lit up with a preview of a text from a number not in her contacts. The message bubble showed 3 words and an ellipsis, just enough to yank my stomach to my shoes. Same hotel, babe. I am not proud of what I did next, but I will not pretend I would do it differently. I unlocked her phone with Face ID while she was gone, years of trust reduced to a neat little trick. The Messages app opened on a thread labeled Consulting. I scrolled. There they were, photos of room service, a grainy mirror selfie of Jessica's dress half unzipped, and a receipt shot where the corner of a black Tesla keycard peeked into frame. The location? Omni Fort Worth Hotel. Date stamps lined up like bullets. Wednesday, Thursday, and the night of the steakhouse. I took screenshots and airdropped them to my laptop in the office. My hands were steady for the first time since 8:47 p.m. at Ruth's Chris. I opened a new folder and named it plainly, Evidence. Inside, I created subfolders, texts, receipts, photos, because structure makes pain less slippery. In iCloud settings, I saw something else, shared locations. Find My showed Jessica's phone had pinged outside our usual orbit more than once. Twice from the Omni, once from a boutique hotel by the Stockyards in Fort Worth. I exported the location history, dragged the file into Evidence, and stared at the map dots like they were stars forming a constellation that spelled out the word, betrayal. When Jessica came back with bags, she tossed a new set of white towels on the counter and made a joke about how ours are looking tired. I nodded, poured myself coffee, and asked how traffic was. She said fine, smiled, and asked if I wanted to catch a movie that night. I watched her unzip a plastic-wrapped bath mat and imagined the hotel carpet under her heels, her laugh in a hallway that echoed. The sound of packaging tearing was almost loud enough to drown out my thoughts. Almost. Sunday evening, my brother Nate called. He lives down in Austin, runs a small landscaping business, and swears by black coffee and blunt truth. I told him just enough. Party, Chandler, a feeling I could not shake. He went quiet for a beat, then said, "You want me to drive up?" I told him not yet. I needed to know what I was holding before I threw it on the table. "Then do not confront until you are ready to finish the game," he said. Saying it out loud without an endgame is just bleeding on the floor. It was the kind of thing Nate says that sounds harsh until you realize it is the only way he knows to love. Straight lines, clean edges. Monday morning at work, Chandler summoned me with a calendar invite titled Q3 Pipeline, Quick Touch. His glass-walled corner office sits like a lighthouse at the end of our floor, all skyline and sunshine. He wore a navy suit and the performative kindness of a man who never pays for his own coffee. "Mark," he said, rising, smile ready, hand outstretched. I took it. His skin was cool and dry. "Heard there was some tension Friday night. Would hate for domestic concerns to muddy your professional clarity." He said it like he was handing me a life jacket, not the cement block he had tied to my ankle. I nodded, asked about the pipeline, and took notes while he mansplained a forecast I had built. When he pivoted to work-life balance, when he slid a compliment about Jessica's charm into the air like a lit match, I looked at the glass behind him and saw my face floating in the city like a weather system that had decided to stall. That afternoon, I started a different kind of project plan. Call it petty, call it survival, I called it necessary. I listed deliverables, documentation, corroboration, chain of custody. I scheduled my own life like I would a rollout, milestones, contingencies, sign-offs. I was not just building a case for divorce, I was building a case for my dignity. In the evenings, while Jessica watched reality shows about couples who could not communicate, I combed statements. My joint credit card online history lit up with fine dining that did not involve me. 2 Uber charges from Fort Worth on nights she said she was at book club. A $682 consulting Venmo from an account with the username DC Advisory, which was either clumsy or confident or both. I exported PDFs, circled charges, dropped them into evidence. I bought a cheap spiral notebook from CVS and started logging dates, times, places, my own ledger of the slow disassembling of a marriage. Then, a crack in the professional facade. A colleague from finance, Linda, asked if we could grab 5 minutes off the record. We ducked into a phone booth room with a door that stuck. She leaned in and whispered, "You did not get this from me, but Chandler is moving consulting invoices through a shell vendor. The approvals look odd." She looked sorry just saying it. "I am telling you because I like working with you, and because I hate watching good people get used." I thanked her, promised nothing, and added a new folder inside evidence, fraud. That night, I could not sleep. I made coffee at 1:13 a.m. and stood in the dark kitchen with Duke at my feet. The refrigerator hummed like a tired old man. I opened the laptop and mapped things out. Jessica's betrayals in one column, Chandler's in another, intersections shaded in gray where their timelines kissed. Omni receipts, Tesla charging stops on his expense report that lined up with her location pings. A photo she had sent him of a lipstick-stained bourbon glass with the caption, "Your favorite trouble," time-stamped 8:51 p.m. Be as 4 minutes after my world cracked at Ruth's Chris. I printed it, held the warm paper like it might burn me, and slid it into a manila folder I labeled by hand. The ink bled a little in the humid kitchen air. Evidence should be tactile. It should have weight. On Wednesday, I parked 2 blocks from the Omni in Fort Worth and watched the valet stand from inside my truck. I felt like an amateur PI, which is to say, stupid and alive. At 6:42 p.m., an all-black Tesla pulled up, and Daniel Chandler stepped out in a gray suit and a smile that had closed million-dollar deals and opened countless doors. He handed the keycard to the valet like he had been born doing it. At 7:08, Jessica arrived in a sundress I had seen once on our anniversary in Fredericksburg. She did a little twirl while she waited for the valet ticket, the same twirl she had done for me in a mirror, and my throat tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. I took photos from the passenger window, zoomed too far, hands shaking, but the faces were unmistakable. They met beside a ficus like lovers in a rom-com, then disappeared through the revolving door. I did not go in. There is a line between hurt and self-harm, and I had decided not to cross it anymore. I drove to the stockyards, parked under a faded mural of a longhorn, and sat on a bench while tourists bought cowboy hats and took selfies in front of a bronze cattle drive. A busker played Wagon Wheel like it was the only song left in the world. I tried to remember the first good thing Jessica ever did for me, the way she brought me soup when I caught the flu, our second winter, how she stuck a note in my lunch bag that said, "I am proud of you," the day I led my first big meeting. I tucked the memory away, not to save it, but to promise I would not let this ugliness erase the fact that once upon a time, I had chosen with an honest heart. When I got home, I placed the new photos into the folder and locked the drawer. Jessica returned after midnight, smelling faintly of hotel conditioner and something floral that was not her usual perfume. She slid into bed and draped an arm across me, and I lay there staring at the ceiling fan. In the darkness, revenge is a loud companion. It whispers options, it drafts speeches, it rehearses scenes where you win in front of a crowd that finally understands. I knew enough now to hurt both of them, but Nate's voice kept repeating, "Do not confront until you are ready to finish the game." So I waited. I attended meetings, I answered emails, I mowed the lawn in neat, useless lines. I sat at a bar on Lower Greenville one night, watched the Rangers game on a flickering TV, and wrote a list on a bar napkin. Lawyer, accountant, HR contact, outside counsel. Underneath, like a headline, I wrote one sentence and underlined it twice. The sweetest payback is not rage, it is precision. And while I did not yet know exactly how I would orchestrate the reveal, I knew the venue. Chandler loved an audience, and so did Karma. There would be a room, and there would be a table, and there would be light, bright enough that no one could pretend not to see. The weeks that followed were like living in two parallel realities. On the surface, I was still Mark Reynolds, dependable project manager, loyal husband, a guy who grilled burgers in the backyard on Sundays and mowed his lawn every Saturday morning like clockwork. But beneath that suburban camouflage, I was building something darker, something cleaner. Call it revenge, call it justice, call it survival. Every day I was piecing together a puzzle, and when it was finished, the picture would ruin them both. At work, Chandler strutted through the halls like he owned the whole skyline. His laugh carried, his cologne trailed behind him like exhaust, and he loved to clap me on the back in front of others, as if I was his protege. Jessica, meanwhile, doubled down on her performance at home. More sweet talk, more fake interest in my day, more, "We should take a trip, just us." It was the behavior of a guilty woman trying to control the narrative. I played along, I smiled. I asked her about dinner plans. I kept my tone even and my calendar open, but in the margins of my planner, I was scribbling notes. 7:12 p.m., Tesla parked outside Omni. 9:03 p.m., Jessica Venmo from DC Advisory. I wasn't just gathering evidence now, I was learning their rhythms. Betrayal, it turns out, is predictable. Lovers think they're being clever, but infidelity leaves a pattern like tire tracks in mud. I traced those tracks with the precision of a surveyor. The file I was building in my home office had grown thick enough that the drawer barely shut. Receipts, screenshots, statements, hotel photos, all organized with sticky notes and timestamps. But the most damning piece came from a late-night discovery on the corporate server. Chandler had a shared drive for consulting partnerships. It was sloppy, hidden under 3 subfolders, but I found duplicate invoices submitted by a shell vendor, payments routed to a company registered in Jessica's maiden name. It was small money compared to our firm's scale, 20 grand here, 15 there, but it was theft all the same. More importantly, it tied Chandler's corruption directly to Jessica. That was the crack in the dam I needed. Infidelity might break me personally, but corporate fraud, that was the lever that could move mountains. I started reaching out, quietly, carefully. Linda from Finance D, who had already hinted at Chandler's shady accounting, agreed to meet me at a diner off 75, a place with cracked vinyl booths and bottomless coffee. I slid the folder across the table, and she scanned the documents with the speed of someone who had been waiting for proof. She didn't say much, just whistled low and muttered, "This will bury him." I told her I wasn't ready to bury anyone yet. Timing, I said, was everything. At night, I imagined myself in a western, cowboy hat tilted, spurs jingling, waiting for high noon. The boardroom would be my dusty main street. Chandler, the smug outlaw, Jessica, the accomplice who thought the sheriff would never ride into town. And me? I was the man with the evidence, the revolver loaded with truth. The fantasies kept me sane. I'd sit in bed next to Jessica while she scrolled Instagram, and in my head, I'd hear Ennio Morricone's whistles. I'd picture board members as a jury in cowboy hats, whiskey glasses in hand, watching as I revealed betrayal like flipping cards in a saloon. Sometimes I laughed out loud, and Jessica would look up and ask what was so funny. Just a meme, I'd say. She'd smile, satisfied with that simple lie, not knowing I was rehearsing her downfall. But it wasn't just fantasy. I had to build the mechanics of revenge as carefully as a project launch. Step 1. Line up legal support. I quietly contacted a divorce attorney in uptown Dallas, a sharp woman named Carla, who spoke in clean sentences like bullet points. She reviewed my folder, tapped her pen on the Omni photos, and said, "You've got leverage, don't waste it." She drew up initial papers but advised me not to file until the corporate piece fell into place. 2 birds, she said, 1 stone. Step 2, corporate chain of command. Our company's board was meeting in 3 weeks for the quarterly review. Chandler always opened with his self-congratulatory slide deck. My plan? To have a parallel packet land on the board's desk before he even clicked to slide 2. Proof of financial misconduct, corroborated by finance, tied to Jessica's shell company. The affair, while salacious, was just garnish. The fraud was the entree. Step 3, keep playing the loyal fool. That was the hardest part. Every morning I kissed Jessica goodbye. Every afternoon I sat through Chandler's mentorship. Every evening I ate her pasta while she smiled across the table. Inside, rage and clarity braided together. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was sharpening myself into something new. One night, though, I slipped. We were at a neighborhood barbecue, paper plates sagging with brisket, neighbors chatting about the Cowboys' offensive line. Jessica reached for Chandler's arm. He had dropped by to glad hand like he always did, and my jaw tightened. I muttered something under my breath. Nate, who had driven up from Austin to check on me, leaned close and said, "Almost there, brother. Don't blow it now." I nodded, forced a smile, and passed the potato salad. Revenge tastes better when it's served cold, but the smell of smoke and betrayal nearly made me bite early. The turning point came 2 nights later. Jessica fell asleep on the couch, wine glass half empty, TV blaring some reality show. Her phone buzzed with a message. "Board meeting soon. You'll be there, right? Can't do this without my lucky charm." Chandler. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he could stand in front of a room full of executives with my wife on his arm and not pay the price. That night, I didn't just plan, I decided. The board meeting would be my high noon. I spent the next week triple-checking everything. Copies of receipts, printouts of Venmo transfers, hotel photos time-stamped, fraudulent invoices lined up against clean ones like crooked teeth. I rehearsed my words, pared them down to the essentials. Chandler would try to spin, Jessica would try to deny, but paper doesn't lie. On the Friday before the meeting, I sat in my truck outside the Omni, same as before, watched Chandler stroll out, Jessica clinging to his arm like she'd won the jackpot. The valet pulled the Tesla up, and he kissed her full on the lips, right there in front of half of Fort Worth. Something inside me went quiet. The hurt drained, replaced by steel. They weren't even careful anymore. They thought I was beaten, a joke, a man who'd look the other way forever. I started the truck, the engine growling under the Texas night, and whispered to myself, "You don't even see it coming, do you?" Because betrayal blinds the guilty. But precision makes you invisible until it's too late. And in just a few days, the 2 people who humiliated me would find out how sweet payback can taste when it's served at the right table, in the right room, under lights so bright no one could pretend not to see. The day of the board meeting dawned clear and hot, Texas sun already baking the asphalt by 8 in the morning. I shaved, put on my best navy suit, and knotted a tie Jessica had given me years earlier, back when gifts still meant something. She was already dressed when I came down, a red dress with heels that clicked on the tile. She smiled like we were a power couple heading to a gala. Maybe she thought today was just another showcase for Chandler to gloat while she played the accessory. She had no idea she was walking straight into the showdown I'd been planning for weeks. The headquarters lobby was all glass and chrome, sunlight bouncing off marble floors. Executives filed in, murmuring about quarterly forecasts and market trends. Chandler arrived like a celebrity, silver hair gleaming, arm wrapped around Jessica as if she were his trophy. My coworkers glanced at me, some with pity, some with curiosity, none daring to speak. I didn't flinch. I carried a leather briefcase stuffed with the kind of truth that can break careers and marriages in one sweep. The boardroom itself was cold and cavernous, a long mahogany table stretching under recessed lights. Coffee cups steamed, PowerPoints flickered on a massive screen, and everyone took their seats. Chandler stood at the head, smiling that politician's smile, and clicked to his first slide. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this quarter, our firm achieved record growth thanks to bold leadership and relentless dedication." I let him go on for 3 slides, then I raised my hand. "Before we continue," I said, voice steady, "I'd like to distribute some supplemental material." Heads turned. Chandler's smile twitched, but he nodded. "Of course, Mark. Always good to have data." I opened the briefcase, slid thick manila envelopes down the table, one by one. Inside, screenshots, invoices, receipts, location data, photos of Jessica and Chandler at hotels. Proof of fraudulent shell companies tied to Chandler, with Jessica's maiden name splashed across registrations. Every page time-stamped, every detail undeniable. The room went silent except for the shuffle of papers. One board member adjusted his glasses, another leaned forward with a whistle. Chandler's face drained of color as he realized what was in front of him. Jessica glanced down, eyes widening, then flicked to me with a look that could have killed if looks carried bullets. "This," I said, standing, "isn't just about inappropriate relationships. It's about corporate theft, deception, and abuse of power. Our boss, Mr. Chandler, has been siphoning money through shell vendors, one of which is conveniently tied to my wife." I paused, let the words hang like the scent of gunpowder after a shot. "The personal betrayal is mine to handle in court. The financial betrayal is yours to address as a board." The silence broke into chaos, papers rustling, whispered curses, chairs creaking as people leaned across the table. Chandler stammered something about consulting arrangements and confidential matters, but his voice cracked. Jessica, red-faced, tried to whisper to him, but the damage was already done. The chairman, a stern man from Houston with no patience for theatrics, tapped the table. "Mr. Chandler, these are serious allegations supported by substantial evidence. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending investigation." And just like that, the outlaw was unarmed. The man who thought he owned the skyline now sat slumped in his chair, jaw tight, sweat beading on his forehead. Jessica's hand twitched toward his, but he pulled away, self-preservation overtaking romance. The look on her face was a cocktail of betrayal, fear, and realization. She had gambled on the wrong man, and the house had just gone up in flames. I didn't stay for the rest. I gathered my briefcase, nodded to the board, and walked out. My steps echoed down the hall, steady as a drumbeat. Outside, the September heat hit like a wall, but it felt clean, the kind of heat that burns away rot. Jessica caught up with me in the parking lot, heels clacking. "Mark, wait," she started, but I turned, eyes flat. "You made your choice in front of everyone," I said. "Now you get to live with it in front of everyone." I slid divorce papers, already prepared by Carla, into her hands. Her mouth opened, closed, like a fish gasping on dry land. I didn't wait for her answer. I unlocked the truck, Duke's paw prints still faint on the back seat, and drove away. News travels fast in Dallas. By evening, the story was already circulating. Chandler ousted, internal audit underway, whispers of fraud charges. At home, I poured bourbon into a heavy glass and sat on the porch as cicadas buzzed in the trees. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt like mine again. Neighbors waved as they walked dogs. Nate called to say he was proud I hadn't gone nuclear too early. "Precision," he said. "That's what wins." And he was right. I hadn't thrown punches or screamed or begged. I had waited, documented, and delivered the truth under the brightest lights possible. Later that week, Jessica tried again. Texts about talking things through, voicemails about making a mistake. I didn't respond. Revenge isn't just about the reveal. It's about walking away clean while the guilty are left in their own wreckage. My payback wasn't rage. It wasn't humiliation. It was freedom. And that's what betrayal taught me. You can't always stop someone from hurting you, but you can decide how you answer. My wife and my boss thought they'd written my ending. What they didn't know was that I was patient enough to write my own. In the end, the sweetest payback wasn't ruining them. It was reclaiming me.